So don't let them steal your light. Don't let them break your stride. There's light on the other side. You'll see all the rain clouds follow me. It's a revolution. Gonna make you out tonight. It's a revolution.
Hi everyone, welcome back to Women in Athletics. I'm so excited to have not only an incredible person, but such a strong athlete with me today, Madison Hubbell. So some of her accomplishments among the many are that she is a two-time world medalist, 2018 Grand Prix Final Champion, 2014 Four Continents Champion, two-time US National Champion, and of course, the 2018 Olympian. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about how you got started in figure skating in the first place.
Well, that was kind of my own doing. Unlike many whose parents maybe have a background in the sport, I just saw it on TV, and there were a few skaters at the time that I loved, but specifically Kristi Yamaguchi. And I thought she was so beautiful, and I wanted to look and be just like her. So I just begged my parents until finally they took me to an arena when I was about 5 years old. And, I just haven't really looked back since. So
That's so good to hear. Yeah, definitely a lot of the times it is the parents that are kind of spearheading it because the children are so young, they don't really know what to do, or it starts off as a kid's birthday party situation. So that's really nice that you were the one that was this is a beautiful sport and I want to go into this.
yeah, I think my parents didn't think it was going to pan out. I had started ballet before that, but the excitement very quickly dwindled. I every class I'd be like, do I have to go, So I think they thought as soon as I was uncomfortable or I got my first blister that I would kind of back off, but joke's on them.
Yeah, definitely went off. And you were first skating with your brother, so how was that?
Well, I had one partner before Kiefer, but barely. It was just my introduction to ice dance. And eventually my brother began skating with me because I knew that I really liked ice dance. And so it was originally kind of my parents' ploy to get me to compete and at least be seen a little bit, and then hopefully find another partner. That time period lasted 11 years, so not quite what they were expecting, but it was really great. I think that so much of my strength came from starting with that one family unit and having a really strong protective brother by my side at the beginning of my career. I think I owe a lot to him for kind of being able to grow up in a very safe environment and feeling comfortable in my own skin.
That's really great. Yeah, I mean, especially when girls are starting off at such a young age and you're being thrown out into the competitive world where there's so many outside sources, judging you essentially, and then you have a partner who, maybe you don't know so well, you just got started, or you haven't really built that connection. It can feel really isolating. So that's nice that you had someone that you were this person has my back literally no matter what.
Yeah, it was a great way to start.
Yeah. So when was it the first time that you started to feel pressure in your career to look a certain way?
It actually, I think the first time that I was told, I don't know that I felt pressure because I was a pretty bold young lady. And, of course that's thanks to my parents, but also I think just somehow my nature is a bit, I'm confident in what I feel, and I always felt fine. But my very first partner before Kiefer was just another club skater when I was young. And his mother was the first person who actually said something we were at Lake Placid doing a camp, and I was so young, it's hard to believe, but I was maybe like 8 or 9. And I was always a pretty muscular person. Like, you could tell that I wasn't going to be like lanky. I'd been muscular since I was like 5 years old. And so she made a comment, we were staying in a cabin together, and she made a comment saying like, basically my mom had made pasta for dinner. And she was like, well, just so you know, pasta is really not an option for Madison. Like, that's not going to be something that she can eat. And my mom was kind of like, what? Like, excuse me? And I was so over my head that, like, I look back now and think, wow, that's crazy. Like, I feel sorry that some people maybe deal with this and don't have the ability to let it go in one ear and out the other. But I also was very lucky that my mom was there to be like, yeah, sure. And 6 months later, the partnership ended and I got to skate with my brother, you know? And then really probably like the age that I started feeling a little bit more pressure was about 14. And it was when my brother and I first started being like quite competitive on the junior circuit. And like, it was a very clear image when you would go, and all the Eastern European and Russian girls were always like, that was aesthetic. Like, the thinner you are, the better your score. Like, it wasn't a big mystery. And any struggle that you felt in the program, or any like bobble, God forbid, on a lift, it was like, well, that's obviously because you're too big and it's too hard to move. Like, the audacity. So I started feeling a bit of pressure around that age. And I mean, I even had competitors, this one Russian competitor actually on the bus after a competition, he said something about, oh, I'm so hungry, I'm gonna go eat dinner like in the cafeteria. And I said, oh yeah, me too. And then he was like, you're gonna eat dinner? And I was like, yeah, we just competed. Like, of course I am. And he's like, but it's 8 p.m. And I was like, I'm not understanding what's happening here. And he's like, no, Russian girls, they just don't eat after 6. That's just something that they don't do. And that's like, you should give it a try. And I was like, no, I'm good.
It's just so, oh my gosh. And
it's like so inside of the culture. It's hard to avoid it. So there were certainly like those years that I struggled. Like, I'm very lucky that I always say, like, I was lucky because when I looked in the mirror, I didn't believe that I looked bad. And so my desire to please other people, or my desire to have a certain success, was never like supported by that image of looking at myself in the mirror and being like, ugh. I always looked and I was like, I don't really see what they see. I think I'm just gonna eat like a normal meal, actually. So I'm just very lucky that I had like people around me that always supported that.
yeah. And I mean, anyone who's been around you, I'm sure, can tell that you are such like a strong-minded person. And I can really see how you have that, like, nothing is going to bother me. I'm going to do the best for myself. And that's really the only important thing. And it definitely is difficult because it does depend on your personality and the people that surround you. I mean, if you are a little bit more prone to being like self-conscious, and you don't have someone like your mother or your brother who's there to protect you and look out for you, and you don't have that education yourself of, I need carbs to fuel my body. Like, that is the number one energy source for the body. Like, I literally can't compete the best that I can without it. Or like, I need to look a certain way and have the muscle in order to perform the best that I can. So it definitely does get into that like tumble effect of, who do I believe? And like, everyone around me is telling me I look bad, so like, it must be true.
Yeah, exactly.
That's crazy that even at such a young age of like 9 years old. I mean, that's when you should be a child. You should eat whatever, I mean, thrive, live your best life. And I remember for me, it kind of happened, I think I was still like 13, 14, and my mom was giving me a big plate of pasta, and I could eat that in like 30 seconds, easy. And then
Yeah.
people being like, you know, you should probably like start cutting down on the pasta, like you're getting a little heavy. And I'm like, well, I'm also going through puberty. But
Yeah.
my parents, being that like Soviet Union background, were also like, all right, 6 o'clock, we're not eating after this, no more pasta. And like when you have coaches that are the same, it kind of is like, I have no other choice. I'm not buying my own groceries.
Right.
I'm not making my own meals. So it's hard when like your life isn't in your own control.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I remember even there were some years like in my teens that it wasn't like, I mean, I was just trying to be mindful, you know, I was just trying to be like strict with myself because I knew at the end of the day, like I like eating and I like food, and my family like eats normally. So I knew that I had to almost like be overly strict in my mind. Like my intention was to be very strict. And then I would just kind of like eat normal because otherwise I would just snack and graze more than I expected. And I remember so clearly like one time that I'm sure it was leading up to competition or something. I was doing homework and my mom's like, okay, it's dinner time. And I was like, Mom, I'm not hungry. I'm not going to eat. And she was like, no, yes, you're going to eat dinner. And I'm sure it was like at some point, you know, she knew that maybe deep down the reason I wasn't going to eat dinner was because I was thinking, well, if I'm not hungry, like I don't have to eat now. And maybe tomorrow I'll be like a little thinner than today, you know? And it's just like the seed, those like little moments where she was like adamant. She's like, no, you're going to sit down. You're going to eat. You can eat the parts of it that you like. You can eat the vegetables. You can eat, like, you don't have to eat everything, but you're going to sit down with the family and you're going to eat like normal. And I thought it was like overkill at the time, but it's like those little moments that somebody was there for me and made sure that I didn't get carried away, because it's like anything, like it's a habit that becomes addictive. And like the same as I fell into biting my nails for years, I could have fallen into an eating disorder or, you know, body shaming myself. And I was lucky that I had a lot of people around me that kind of, right as soon as I would say something stupid, they were like, no, we're not gonna start this.
Yeah, stuff like that can very easily, I think, tumble out of control. You know, it goes like a little bit at a time. You're like, oh, I'm not going to do this. And then you see the positive effect. And it does get that like addictive feeling where you're like, oh, like this led to something great. Like I'm going to push it a little more and a little more. I'm going to see like where it can take me. And then soon after, you're like, I don't have the energy to do anything. And that's kind of what happened to me at some point. I was like, oh, I'm going to try and lose weight to like have a certain person feel a certain way about me. And
Right.
then it dropped off and I was like, cool, this is great. And all my coaches were like, you look amazing. And then 2 months later, they're like, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, I'm just eating the same. But like, I didn't even realize that subconsciously it just kept escalating. And in my mind, I was like, I look good. But from an outside source, they were like, you're like too skinny at this point.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's tough. And like, I see it so often. Like that's the very tricky part also of being in a coach position, or even like as a parent, right? Like I had moments where I also like felt like, oh, my mom wants me to be thinner, because I would lose a few pounds or I would get extra lean and she'd be like, wow, you look great. And it's such a slippery slope to compliment people on their weight, because like even if they did it in a healthy way, like we all want that gratification. Like we all want people to say complimentary things. And so I might have lost 5 pounds because I was in the gym and I was eating super healthy. But if I lose 5 pounds and you told me I look great, it's not like every day you're going to tell me I look great if I plateau.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's really tricky to kind of acknowledge somebody's effort, but not make it so that that's like what they're worth. Like, as long as you're that thin, or if you continuously lose weight, I'll keep giving you compliments. It's really tough.
Yeah, I touched on that a little bit with my chat with Christina. We were talking about how when you see skaters around you losing weight and you're like, wow, you look really good, it's definitely a touchy slope, because you're like, well, you lost 10 pounds in a month, you look awesome, but there's no way you could have done that in a healthy manner. So, but
Yeah.
going to that extent and being like, how did you lose weight, is like, why do you want to know? Like, you're prying into my life, and like, you don't want to tell people that, like, personal details. So definitely is that fine line of how do I act around people like that.
Yeah, for sure. And I would say from my side, like, some of the girls that I've known that have struggled a little bit more with their body image, or really altered their eating, like, I've tried to be, even if we're pretty good friends, like, I've tried to kind of reach out, or, just say, like, listen, if you're happy in your body, that's great, but are you feeling good? Are you fine? I just want to make sure, like, if you need anybody, I'm here. And it's so hard too as a competitor, because very often I'm met with kind of that, like, backlash of, you're jealous because we're competitors and you're someone who never achieved what I'm achieving, kind of. You wouldn't know the perspective. Like, you want to be thin and you've never been that thin. So, and I'm like, okay, well, like, I could do it too. I just don't want to.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's hard. Like, people don't always see that the intention is really like, I actually want to just check how you're doing. If you're doing well, that's great. You look great.
Yeah.
But
There is that certain level of toxicity in the sport amongst competitors, which is so sad, because at the end of the day, we are human beings. We have to live with what we do to our bodies for, how many years later. I mean, this is just one moment, like a blink of the eye. And even though you are a high level athlete, you have to take care of your body for longevity. It's not, I'm going to get my body to top shape now, and I'm just going to, like, whatever happens in the end happens. Like, you have to take care of yourself, because those impacts are going to stay with you long after, mental, physical, whatever.
Yeah.
And then I was also wondering, so you partnered up with Zach, and of course he's a big, strong athlete himself. Do you feel like the way you felt about your body changed being with someone who was equally, long and tall and kind of matched you more?
Yeah, I think partnering up with Zach was freeing in multiple ways. I think I've had this very grown-up looking body from a very young age, and my personality is quite in your face, especially when I'm skating. Like, I love sexy music. I love working with sensuality, and skating with your brother when you're, like, very similar in size. We've got so many really disrespectful and rude comments over the years, and it became, like, not only that feeling of kind of pressure, like, nobody put the pressure on me, but, like, it is like physics. Like, Kiefer weighed 15, 20 pounds more than me. He's got a completely different type of body. He has long, thin muscles. He's very flexible. So we would skate with, like, a lot of power, and it's great. But as soon as he had to lift me, it was, like, very stressful for his body. And it was part of why he ended up quitting, is, like, we had a couple bad falls. Like, his back was very bad. His hips were bad. Like, and so I was always having that feeling of, like, I don't want to be unhealthy, but, like, the lighter I can be, just for the physics of it, like, he's going to have a slightly easier time. And then I had the other side of it, which was, like, you can't skate to the music you like. You can't fully express, because when you express, it doesn't look like a brother and sister. And so, like, I had never imagined skating with anybody other than Kiefer, and certainly it wasn't Zach, since we were competitors. But it was kind of one of those undeniable moments where Like I was literally forced into skating with him on the first session. Like, oh, he doesn't know you and Kiefer broke up. Just stroke with him. It'll be fine. just do an exercise. We just want to see. And like right away, it was so exciting. Like you said, like he's 6'2" and he's super powerful and he's like a heavy grounded kind of skater. And I finally felt like I kind of like throw my weight around and use momentum and like really abandon myself in lifts and abandon myself with like the way that I was expressing. And I think certainly that that played into kind of the way that we came out like right away in the first year with a lot of chemistry, and people were like, whoa, I've never seen her like that. And in reality, they saw me like that. They just kept telling me not to be like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's been like a really great experience. And I think it's been kind of, in some ways, a healing experience for both Zach and I, like, because just as like harsh as they can be with women, like they can also be harsh with men. And Zach is certainly not like the typical ice dance body, and like as if that's a thing, right? Yet another you know, thing that's been ingrained into me for 15 years. But you're used to men being like very thin.
Yeah.
And Zach, I don't know if it's supposed to be a compliment, but like random fans will be like, guys, great job. And then they'll see him in person and they'll be like, oh my God, you look like a linebacker, not a skater. And it's kind of like, dude, was that supposed to be nice?
Yeah.
I mean, you're not saying like, wow, you have a lot of muscles. You're saying like, you're a big dude. So I think that like us being able to skate with each other and being a good physical match and like seeing ourselves through each other's eyes was a cool thing to kind of be like, yeah, we're maybe different than what people have been used to, or what people, if they had to type up the ideal partnership, what it would be. But we make it work. And I think, you know, we've had a pretty successful career also because of our health and because of the fact that we've been able to avoid a lot of those like little injuries that come about from just like not treating your body that nicely.
Yeah. I definitely, I mean, when I was skating, I would look up to you guys because I also kind of felt some of that, because I am a pretty tall girl for ice dance, and my first partner was on the shorter side, and I constantly heard, you know, you need to be skinnier, like he can't lift you, he's exhausted, look at him. And then when I finally partnered up with Benoit, I was like, wow, like this guy actually matches me, like my height, my lines. Like I rarely heard about my weight or like my broad shoulders because my broad shoulders because I actually had someone that matched me. And it was so nice to see another team that was of similar stature, you know, bringing something else to the table, being so big and powerful and being able to portray, you know, different characters and kind of like breaking that mold, even though there really shouldn't be that, because it's whatever your body is, it's how you use it to reach optimal performance, to do what you can, bring your own uniqueness to the table. And, you know, trying to put you in this mold is just going to limit you. I mean, do you want me to look a certain way or do you want me to compete my best? Because those can be two different things.
Yeah, for sure.
And when was it that you really started to understand that the world, now I have to rephrase that question. Yeah, okay. So during any of your years of figure skating, did you ever work with any professionals, like sports psychologists, nutritionists?
I started with nutritionists pretty early, because my first like more like serious coaches, they were Russian, and they did put pressure on me from a pretty early age. And they, you know, they spoke with my mom, which is already degrading enough to have people have a meeting about you without you sitting there. And, you know, they, and I don't want to like say anything bad because like, it's not like, that's what they knew, right? That's why we have to have discussions so that people can kind of like learn what helps and doesn't. And that didn't help. But, you know, they started saying like, here's my advice. My friend, she eats this and she eats a head of lettuce at lunch and that's all she eats. And, you know, maybe she could try this. And I remember there was like one time for 3 weeks that I went on like a super strict diet and I was probably eating like, I don't know, 1,200 calories a day, something ridiculous, and like training 5 hours. And I mean, I looked great. I was really good. Yeah, really. I looked like I was going to win Junior Worlds. And then we fell in the program. Kiefer got sick. We skated like horribly. I wonder why. And like right after, my mom was like, you know, that's not the way. So we started working with somebody just locally. It wasn't like particularly helpful. I think, you know, she didn't have a very vast knowledge of like sports nutrition, but pretty quickly US figure skating was able to kind of step in and help. And one of their sports nutritionists, Dan Benardot, he would always show up at like the summer camps and help. And we did like our testing and our blood tests and a DEXA scan and body fat and all of that. And one year I was like, listen, I want to go a little bit more in depth. I want to like make sure everything's good. And I need to like know what I'm capable of. And so he actually invited me to go visit he and his wife in Atlanta so that I could go to his university. And I did a few tests there and fitness tests and all of this to kind of be like, what am I looking at? And like, let's really work on this. And so that was the first time that I worked with someone who kind of talked to me about nutritional timing and, you know, said like, you have to eat carbs and also like fat is good for you. So, and I remember I told my mom like, oh, this is the new diet plan. And like one of the snacks at the end of the night, like they're like, if it's a hard training day and it's the end of the night and you need like an extra boost, take a graham cracker, put peanut butter on it, and then you can have it. And she was like, this is a nutritionist. Like, are you sure? You know, he's like, he told me like, you can eat a sandwich for lunch. And I was like, what? Bread? That's going to work? And so that was like that was the first person that I really started going in depth with, like doing all of the NutriTiming apps. And that year I had like, you know, worked with him like slow and steady. And by the end of the year, I had lost like 4% body fat. I was at like, I don't know, it's 14 or 15% body fat at like 18, 19 years old. I had like very good, I kept all of my muscle during the whole process, like everything that you would hope for, except that by taking more vitamins, like I had already had good bone density. But at the end of the year, when I took another DEXA scan, I had gained 1.5 pounds of bone.
Wow.
Which is something strange, weird. I don't know if it was just the timing of my puberty or whatever it may be. But like all the stats, like I did the test and he was like, this is fantastic. You did amazing. Congrats. And I remember giving it to our coach and she was like, I just don't understand, if your bone density was already good, why you would possibly need more bone density. He was like, she was so disappointed that I had taken the 1.5 pounds back in bone. How dare I? And so like I worked with him for a few years and then he ended up leaving US figure skating. I, you know, have worked since with several people. Now I'm working with someone from Detroit who works with US figure skating named Carrie. And she's also great. She works with a lot of women's sports teams. We've talked recently, like, about getting even more in depth, especially like as I get to an age where realistically, like, I'm going to retire in the next few years and I'm going to be looking at having children. And I actually have to think about like what all of this has as an effect on how fertile I am. And so I've started talking with another specialist and talking about tracking all of my cycle and actually like doing nutrition based on my cycle timing and my like workouts based on actually what I should be doing at that time of the month or how much stamina I may or may not have. And it's like, it's really interesting. It seems like people are getting more and more open to the idea that like women are very complex. And I was shocked to find out recently that almost all wellness and nutrition studies are done on only men.
Yeah.
What? Why? People have been lying to me all these years. Like, how is that possible? I found that out and I was like, oh, wow, okay. And the specialist was like, so it's really about like, you got to track your food, you have to track your body weight, you have to like actually write down how things make you feel, and it has to be intuitive. And it's taken me a long time. Like, I think I was so stubborn about like, I'm going to eat and I'm going to be healthy, and like, that's like, I'm going to do that, and I want to be healthy and I don't want to have injuries. So I didn't really realize that, like, unlike maybe the typical figure skater that has more of like, you know, issues with under eating, I was almost like eating no matter what. I wasn't eating intuitively at all. I wasn't allowing myself like the freedom to eat something that's maybe not like helping my sport today and then tomorrow eat really healthy, and, you know, like, just have some freedom and enjoy food and be a normal person. And it was like 3-4 years ago now, working with a like kind of like a life coach, and I like finally I broke down at some point and I said, like, I just feel like I want to lose a little bit of weight and I have such a hard time. And I was like telling myself, like, I'm somebody that has such a hard time losing weight. Mm-hmm. And she's like, are you sure about that? Or is that like something you're just telling yourself? And I was like, no, I'm sure. Like, I have no willpower at all. And I eat so much. And I, you know, and I was having like this mental breakdown. And she's like, well, like, what are you afraid of if you like lose a little bit of weight, or like what's standing in your way? And I realized that after all of those years of people telling me like, you have to be thin, and me just being how I am, I started realizing that it almost for me played the opposite way, where I didn't want to lose weight, because if I lost weight now, I would be admitting, I'd be proving it, that everybody else was right all along. And I could have lost weight, and I could have been thinner or lighter or leaner or whatever it may be. And it was just really that I was overeating. So they were right all along, and I did not want to prove that to them. And she was like, well, that's really quite egotistical that you think people think that much about you. And I was like, oh, okay. She's like, probably you'll lose 5 pounds. You'll feel better. You'll perform better. And then everybody will go, oh, look, she looks in shape. Cool. And move on. Like, they're not going to care so much as what you're thinking. But for so many years, like, I had coaches telling me, like, you have to be a certain way. And I had like almost dug my heels in the ground and been like, I can't. Mm-hmm. So it's been like, you know, the last 4 years that I've started to know myself better, listen to my instincts more, enjoy food, enjoy like the freedom of, I have like a fair amount of knowledge now after working with so many really amazing specialists, that like I have a fair amount of knowledge that I don't have to overthink. I don't have to always put it in an app. I don't have to always like, I know in general what I need every day. I know the calories. It's easy for me to count and figure it out. So it's like a really freeing feeling to kind of play with that. And at this point, like my body responds so fast because I'm not starving it, and I'm not mistreating my body. So even like all quarantine, I was eating what I felt like. And, you know, it's quarantine. You got to have a few glasses of wine here and there, you know. So finally I was like, okay, it's lift season. Let's be nice to Zach. I'll tone it up a bit, you know. And like, you know, I go down to like the normal 2,000 calories a day, and I lose a pound a week or a pound and a half a week super easy, because my body's just like, it's fine, it's healthy, and it makes sense. But it took me a while to kind of, you know, accept that that's how that works.
Yeah. You definitely mentioned a lot of great things in that response. And touching back to, you know, like bone density and periods, I was shocked when I started, you know, pursuing my education in kinesiology and actually like sitting down and learning about my entire life, essentially, the like science behind what I did all those years. And you read in the textbook the female triad, which is, you know, eating disorders, bone mineral loss, and, you know, mental issues. And it's crazy that the first sports that come up with that are figure skating and gymnastics. And I was like, huh, like why am I not surprised by this? Why is this like, oh, that makes sense? And I mean, girls are at such competitive levels of figure skating at such a young age. I mean, they're doing triples even before they've gone through puberty, and they're under eating, and their body isn't developing properly. And, you know, their bones are incredibly fragile and weak. And that's why you get like girls who will just like go out on a run and then they have a fracture in their foot. I mean, that should not happen. Your body should be stronger than that. And it is so important, especially for women, to think about that developmental phase. You know, how am I fueling my body so that my bones are strong, so that I am fertile? Because that will impact the rest of your life. I mean, it's definitely not a top priority when you're like a 13-year-old girl, but it does impact you. Same with like the hormone levels in your body. I mean, there's so much more to periods than, you know, children. I mean, you need it as a woman to function properly, for your brain health, for everything. And it is so underemphasized. And I don't think I ever heard from anyone, you know, do you have like, occasionally at the doctor, like, when was your last period? Like, oh, you're 17, you haven't had one. It's okay, you're an athlete, like it'll come. Like, that's so normalized, when it's like, like that's a little concerning. Like, back up a little bit, tell me, what are your eating habits? You know, how are you feeling? How often do you get injured?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it's definitely something that should be emphasized much more, because it is an impact. And same as you said, a lot of the research is done by men. I mean, it isn't taken into account when you read in the textbooks. You know, you should have this many grams of carbs, proteins, and fats. It's like, well, who is this based on? Like, should women and men have the same amount? You know, what if I am trying to have children? What if I am pregnant? That's something else I didn't really realize, is that a lot of the studies, there isn't really anything on pregnant women already. It's like, you're just you before you have a child, and then you deal with it afterwards, and like go specifically just to like pregnancy sources. But it's like, what if I want to like preemptively think about that and like grow with my body? And that is a lot. I mean, I think that does go into the same thing as like the Weight of Gold documentary, you know, like, what is life like after retirement? Like, you're not just thrown out there and you're like, I've been doing the same thing for 20 years and now it's over and everything has completely changed, and like, I feel so alone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say like Dan Benardot was a great person to have, like as my first really in-depth nutritionist, because he was one of the only people that like very quickly was saying like, how's your cycle? Is everything okay? I think, okay. Is everything okay? And is it regular? And already I'm someone even at a healthy weight that doesn't have like the most regular cycle. So, you know, he was very adamant, like this isn't something to play with. And there are so many things that are beneficial about having it regularly. And you don't want to push your diet so much that you're starting to lose it or you're starting to delay it. And, you know, I think there are other factors that do that. Sometimes we're training like, and it's just the pure stress level, emotional stress level that can push it back. But certainly like within the federation, it was like normal to be like, oh, well, you don't have that. That's like, if you're lean enough to be a top athlete, most of the time you'll lose it, which only makes you feel like if you don't lose it, you're fat. And, you know, I think that there were many people, you know, especially when I was very young, that maybe could have helped some of the younger generations like Dan, but like you can only help if people want help. And I know that's why like he and I connected so well. And like, you know, we even now, he asked me like for a quote for one of his textbooks, and every once in a while he'll email me, or, you know, like we keep in touch somehow, because he was like such an important piece for me to like stay healthy at a crucial time. And, you know, at some point I remember he was like, I'm not coming back. And I was like, why? Like, you guys are amazing. I don't understand why you wouldn't come back to work with everybody. And he was like, people need to want the help. Like if I say the information and literally all the coaches make fun of the information, and like I remember he was one of the big proponents, and like you can say you don't like Gatorade because it's not organic or it's not natural, but he was kind of saying like, if you're going to be on the ice working very hard for 2 hours and you can't eat anything, and you need to just like drink something, you need something that you can intake some sugar, some calories. Like you need, like you can't train, when I was young, like 4 hours in a row and then not want to eat anything because your stomach is going to be full. And like you need to, and I remember going to my coaches at the time, and they weren't the only ones in that generation, I know. And even skaters would say stuff about it, saying like, I'm just a figure skater. I don't need Gatorade. It's not like I'm doing football. I'm not sweating like crazy. I don't need that. And like, I would literally get told, even with water, you can't drink on the ice because it's a distraction. What? Don't drink anything. You can drink out. You can definitely go 2 hours, because anyways, if you drink something, maybe you'll have to use the restroom, and that's going to be a waste of time. And like, it's just crazy. So, you know, it's a shame that he left. Luckily, they've found other amazing nutritionists at this point that are also very level-headed. And I think, you know, people are getting more comfortable with speaking about things. You know, I brought up the whole cycle tracking and trying to pay attention, maybe having some more like women's seminars within the federation, even from a very young age. Just to talk about like the basics of what's happening in your body. Like they don't teach that well in school, that's for sure. And as an elite athlete, it's like, it's very important information to know that these things are happening, and your hormones are going to have like a serious impact on how well you recover and how well you can perform, and what times of the month maybe you aren't going to be very creative, and vice versa. And I brought it up to the federation, and like they were very open to it, but at the same time it's like, I'm not sure how to start, because are you sure the kids are going to want to hear it? Yeah. And I'm like, can't we force them to listen? It would help them so much. I wish I could go back in time and know this stuff.
Yeah. Definitely. I remember, I think the first time I was like taught that in school was in like 6th grade, and it was like half of a semester, maybe even like just 5 classes throughout the like health class. And it is, I mean, that's great to like, just graze the topic, but it's also
Yeah.
very different for athletes. I mean, when you're pushing your body to that extent, I mean, you're in a different ball game. Like, you don't know how what they taught you in school applies to your life now. And I know a lot of girls, you're like, oh, thank God I don't have my period this month. Like, it's something else I don't have to deal with. But like, why? Why don't you have it? It should be more than a relief, really. And I think that would be incredible just to, I mean, I think a lot of the issues are just from a lack of education. And it's not really like the coach's fault. I mean, they didn't go to
They're not
school.
nutritionists. Yeah.
I mean, but I do think if everyone just had like a more general understanding of each topic, so that a coach wouldn't say, hey, don't eat protein, have only 3 ounces a day, and don't eat any carbs. Well, how does you telling that impact the skater? It could be just like one instance in your life, but it could impact the rest of their life. And, how are you telling information? How is it impacting their mental health? It's all something that should be taken into account, especially for coaches who are around, such girls at impressionable ages. I mean, you are their, like, one of their biggest role models if you grow up around that, and constantly hearing things like that from sources that aren't qualified to speak about that is a little bit off-putting. And I mean, I worked with Carrie throughout like the couple years of the last years when I was skating, and she was incredible, but there was still that lack of connection between her and my coach. So I would hear one thing on the ice, and I would hear one thing from her, and she's like, well, I actually have the like scientific like information to back up. I have your like skin fold test. I can show that, you decreased in your body fat throughout this time. And it's like, if I bring it up to them, they're just gonna like be like, whatever. But it's like, well, hearing 2 different things is not gonna help me. Like, I'm in constant battle with myself. How do I then progress and keep going?
Yeah. It's very tough. There's definitely a connection that has to be made, between parents at that young age, coaches, and like you say, like, education is key. If, like, even sometimes I'm surprised with people my age or in their 20s, and you talk about carbs, and they're like, oh, I don't eat any carbs. And I'm like, what do you mean you don't eat any carbs? Well, I don't eat any carbs. I'm like, you eat fruits and vegetables, right? Like they don't understand at all. Or like the same, I was vegan for like the year of the Olympics, and I kind of go back and forth, and maybe like 80% vegan now. And I get so many questions about like, well, how do you get protein? And I'm like, protein is not only in meat. Like, there is a very large lack of, even the basic knowledge. And for me, that was like the most freeing part, is kind of understanding like the basic science of it. Like, you can manipulate it so much easier when you know what you're doing. I don't know.
I think
And then, it gives you the power also to like put what maybe some people that don't know, and it's not their, like you say, it's not really their job to know. Like, the coaches know a lot of stuff. Maybe they don't need to know everything about nutrition, but if you know what you're supposed to eat, and you know the effect of certain foods, and you know the combination, and whatever, your macros, like, if the coaches tell you you shouldn't eat this, and that's their experience, that's something that did not work for them, you can be like, oh, okay, cool. They're telling me to eat those 20 grams of carbs, and I'm eating this other source of 20 grams of carbs. So in reality, it doesn't matter. I'm going to eat what suits me and what I like. And so it would be really helpful, like, but people have to be interested and dedicate some time to that.
Yeah, I think that can tie into, wanting that help from a nutritionist. I think hearing someone tell you, you have to eat carbs, you're going to be like, well, no. But understanding why, how it impacts you physiologically, what energy systems your body is using in your sport, how you need carbs to create ATP for energy. I think maybe some more people would be more receptive to that, because then you're actually learning, you're understanding. It's not just someone telling you and you're like, well, why should I believe you? Like, I'm not going to go eat that. So I think even that, like educating yourself, being open to, maybe someone telling you something that you don't agree with, but having that open mindset of, I'm going to be a sponge. I'm going to expand and retain all the information. And then from there, I can play around. A lot of it comes with experience. Like, this might not work for me. It's all just how your body functions. So when you have all that information, you can then be like, I'll do this, I'll do this, I'll do this, but you're doing it from an educational perspective, not like I'm going to do the keto diet, I'm going to do this diet. Someone told me not to eat any carbs, someone told me not to drink any water, and we'll just see what happens. It's a very different pathway to take.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like I was discussing recently in a women's health class about, the whole thing of studies not being done on women, and we started discussing about, especially for sports like ice dance and pairs, where there's already pressure because of the lifting and all of that to be a certain size. Now, most of my workouts for the last 15, 20 years and most of my training is done in sync with a man. And whether or not he has different exercises or more weight, generally we're doing kind of the same training, where it's like we build, we taper a bit, we compete, we build, with no consideration at all as to maybe how I'm feeling or how that works for me. And we talked about how, like, for a man, like the way that their like cycle would be is like every single day it's exactly the same, it repeats. And like you wonder why more often than not men kind of stay in our sport, they stay in similar shape, maybe slightly better shape, especially cardiovascularly, but like their bodies stay relatively the same all the time. And it's always the girls who are like, well, she got way out of shape in the off season, or like all of a sudden, oh, did you see her this week or last week? She seemed like a lot thicker. Oh, did you see? And now she lost weight. And it's like, there's literally no consideration, at least in my career so far, being in like, where are you in your cycle, or how are you feeling? Because you have to deal with 1 month of kind of this up and then down, and it would be normal to fluctuate. It's normal to fluctuate on the scale. It's normal to fluctuate in your measurement, in your water weight, and all of these things. And that kind of knowledge of, it's not going to be the exact same training for you every single day. And that's fine. That's not something to be looked down upon. But so many times I've like thrown out my lower back because I'm about to start my period. And I'm like, well, it shouldn't matter. I can't use that as an excuse. And I go to the gym and I train as hard as Zach trains. And then all of a sudden I'm like, okay, I can't skate for 2 days. And where did it get me? It didn't get me anywhere. But there's not that much research done about that. So it has to be like you say, like you have to educate yourself, and then you have to be okay and be confident enough to follow your instinct and speak up and say, I can feel, and I've learned this in the last couple of years, like I can feel that my body doesn't have that in it today. And I would be better off doing this, this, and this, because otherwise I'm going to end up in a worse position. I'm not going to skate for 2 days to recover. And, it takes some guts to stand up to your coach and be like, I'm not doing your schedule today.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I was studying over the summer for my strength and conditioning certification because I love the gym. That was always like my safe space. I felt the best when I could just like focus on lifting the weight, and I'm like, I am incredibly powerful, and like, look at what my body can do. But yeah, I kind of felt the same thing where we would all work out in a group, and you know, boys and girls had different sets and reps, but that was really the extent of it. And I was always like, I feel like this isn't like enough. Like, my body is different than this other skater who's 14 years old, and like, why are we doing the same workout? Like, something seems a little bit off. And even within like me studying, there was no mention of how like different it could be for females because of like a menstrual cycle. It was only like, you know, mesocycles, macrocycles, you're doing it based on when your competition is. But yeah, that is a really good point, that, you know, like, women have that whole other side of things to consider. And like, our bodies go through like schedules on a monthly basis. Like, we might have a competition 2 months out, but like, maybe I have to taper like twice within that time, whereas a man would have to do it only once. And it's crazy that like, it's not even brought up in the book once, like no mention about it, which yeah, that's definitely, thinking back, is you need someone to train you who understands that. And if you don't understand it for yourself, or you can, but you don't know how to implement that in a training schedule, that can then, you know, impact your performance in ways that you might not even realize are.
Yeah. More room for improvement.
Yeah. So in wrapping up this chat, what would be your main advice to girls who are watching this video and look up to you and might want to know some things?
Well, I would say, you know, in the beginning, definitely reach out to somebody that feels safe, that feels maybe separate from kind of the community that you're already getting influenced by. And, you know, for me, I had family that was very supportive. Not everybody does. So, you know, to find like a nutritionist or a sports psychologist that can really give you maybe a different perspective. There is no real perspective. Everybody has their own version of reality, but like, you know, outside of the sports world that you're in, or whatever community you're in that's giving you pressure to be a certain way, it's really nice to have a voice that can kind of even be your soundboard, because when you say things out loud, maybe you'll even hear yourself that it sounds a little bit extreme. And then from there, it's just like all about knowledge for me. Like, it doesn't take that much. I'm not talking about having to go to school for it. Like, there's so many courses and there's so many things that you can learn just by watching, even if it's not like about diet per se, but just about food in general. Like, start learning about the food that you're eating, and, you know, food industries and the way that they market food, because even learning that like is so eye-opening, especially in America, where like so many products are marketed with very confusing language.
Yes.
What it says on the box is not what it is. So just like start learning, be curious, have fun with food. Like, that's something that is very important to me. Like, you have to eat to survive. So why do it for like without enjoying it? Learn to cook, do something that, you know, inspires you and makes food feel like it's something more than how many calories you ate. So yeah, for me, that's that. And everybody has insecurities. Trust me, like, I'm seen as somebody very confident, and I've had to work at that. But no matter what, like, every person sees themselves in the mirror and sees little things that are going to bother them from day to day. That part's pretty normal. It's just keeping it all in perspective, seeing your good qualities as well.
Absolutely. Great advice. And thank you so much for joining me in this chat. I had a great time speaking with you, and I hope that some of the things we said can really help out, you know, girls, boys, nonetheless.
Awesome. It was great to see you as well.
Yeah.